On episode 652 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we discuss how to design your perfect mobility training program after 40. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/652. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness, the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast is here for you. Each week, we dive deep into health and fitness topics that affect those of us over 40. I'm Coach Allen. I'm an NASM certified personal trainer with specializations in corrective exercise, behavior change, performance enhancement, and fitness nutrition. A Precision Nutrition Level 1 coach, a FAI certified functional age-link specialist, and an OTA Level 2 online trainer. Each week, I'm joined by our co-host, Coach Rachel. She is an NASM certified personal trainer and a RRCA Level 1 run coach. Let us be your coaches as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. Hey, Ras. How are you?
Good, Alan. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. Like normal, staying busy.
Mm-hmm.
Got a lot of clients that I'm helping out right now. So I'm really enjoying that I'm staying busy. You know, slower time at Lula's. So at least for me, for the next week or so, I'm focused on my clients and getting them great results. Yeah, the next 2 weeks, be a little bit harder because my wife is going out of town for a girls' trip. And that leaves me alone at Lula's. So just go run 3 businesses, Alan. Just But you know, today is the 23rd. Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. My birthday is yesterday and Mike's is the day before, but here we are celebrating our birthdays together. Thank you.
There you go. You're welcome. Now, I did want to let folks know that we are looking to change the music for the podcast. And so if you go to our Facebook group at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/group, go to the Facebook group. There's going to be a post there. It'll be pinned on the top of the group to make it pretty easy to find. Vote for which one of the 5 songs that I have out there. It's about a minute I have of each one. So it'll only take you, a few minutes to go through them. When you find the one you like, go ahead and vote for it. And then I'll be using that for the intro and outro music starting in future episodes.
Awesome. That sounds like fun.
Yeah. So what's going on with you?
Nothing. Like you mentioned, it's summer. It's busy. Lots going on. Birthdays, weddings, all sorts of things. Trying to keep up on everything. It just seems like, the summers just get busier and busier. So
you got past the wedding. You got past the wedding. So that's done. Check mark.
Yep. Yeah, we actually celebrated twice. So we had a small wedding for just family only at the very end of June. And then mid-July, we had a larger celebration with extended family so that we could all celebrate the kids. We both come from very large families. I should say both sides. David's and his family and my family are quite large. So it's kind of fun squeezing everybody into a small space. So, but yep, lots to celebrate.
Awesome. All right. You ready to talk about mobility?
Sure.
Today, we're going to talk about how to design your perfect mobility training program after 40. So this is following along with the other episodes we did, episode 649, where we talked about developing your own resistance training program. And then on episode 651 last week, we spoke about designing a perfect running program. So today we're going to talk about mobility. Before we get going, I kind of want to break up the difference between 2 words that often get misconstrued. That's flexibility and mobility. Flexibility is the ability of your joint to move within a range of motion. In some cases, it can move beyond the range of motion that it was originally designed to do, and we call that hyperflexibility. For others, they have problems with the joint, and that problem with the joint prohibits them from moving a full range of motion. So that joint issue is limiting their flexibility. Okay, but that's about the movement of the joint. With mobility, we're talking about the muscles and the muscle's ability to move the joint through the full range of motion. So sometimes the issues we have with moving a joint through the full range of motion is the joint itself. And in that case, we're talking about flexibility. And other times we're talking about the body's ability to move through that full range of motion using our muscles. And that's when we're talking about mobility. Okay. Now, there's a lot of benefits to having good mobility, the key of which is that it causes a reduction in injuries. If you have good mobility, you're going to have good full control of your movements. And therefore, when you're doing things, you're going to have a better form when you do it. And a better form, particularly under load, is going to help you avoid injuries. So we always want to have good form, particularly when we have load. And so having good mobility means we're better able to move in the proper form and therefore do it right and not hurt ourselves. Also, good mobility helps improve your balance. So if you have an issue with your mobility, it will often affect your movement pattern, and that movement pattern can cause problems with balance. So having better mobility improves your balance. Also, because we're moving our bodies and we have ligaments and tendons that are there, if we're pushing ourselves consistently through at one range of motion, and we don't really have control in those range of motions, our ability to do them is hampered. And as a result, we can tear or strain ligaments and tendons. So having good mobility actually improves the ability of you to control the movement and less risk that you're going to have a tear or strain. Whenever we're talking about improving our mobility, what we're really talking about is addressing muscles that are tight. So each muscle has the ability to do two things. It can constrict or it can lengthen. Okay. And so what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to constrict through one side of the range of motion, and we want to be able to lengthen to go through the other side of the full range of motion. So a fully lengthened and then fully constricted muscle should be able to move the body through a full range of motion. Where we usually have problems is that if we've had certain jobs or certain movement patterns over our lifetimes, we may have really tight muscles. And as a result of tight muscles, we're not able to lengthen that muscle as far as it needs to lengthen for a full range of motion. And that's typically where we're going to focus our attention. I want to go over a few key points before I talk about some of the protocols that you can use for mobility training. Okay, first, always warm up a muscle before you do mobility work, because we're going to be pushing the muscle at one end of its range of motion. We want to make sure that we've warmed up that muscle so that it's capable of doing it. You can equate this to a cold rubber band, and you pull it and it just snaps. We want to make sure that the muscle is fully engaged and moving and warm so that it can benefit from the mobility exercise and not be harmed by it. Okay. Now, the other thing to understand is that not every muscle needs to be stretched or worked on, because if the muscle already lengthens to its full length, there's no real benefit to doing additional mobility on it. So an example would be if you have a job where you sit a lot, your glutes probably have no problem fully lengthening. In fact, they may have some difficulty really doing the constriction part more. And so we just want to work on strength for that. But muscles that typically are not tight don't really need to be stretched. So when you do a stretching program, you don't necessarily need to do a full body stretching regimen. Focus on the muscles that you know are tight, and that's where you're going to get the benefit. And then to hop into the why we do this and what's actually happening here, I want to get into just a little bit of the science of the muscle. So where the muscle meets the bone is a tendon. So there's muscle tendon, and it's meeting the bone. At that junction is a thing called the Golgi tendon organ, or GTO. So what this thing is, this is basically a muscle tension sensor, and it can shut down the muscle if it senses too much tension. So, and the reason that's important is that Golgi tendon organ, or GTO, is there to keep the muscle from ripping off of the bone. And it's a bad thing. We don't want that to happen. So this is a really good fixture in our muscles that allows it to protect itself. If it's dealing with extreme weight or something, extreme pull, it will just release. And so if you've ever tried like tool chest or something heavy off of a counter that's a little high, you reach up and you grab it, and then you notice that when you get it off the edge, it's so heavy you can't actually carry it with your biceps, and your biceps just seem to go limp. That's just to save your bicep from ripping off the bone. Not necessarily a good thing for your toes, but it's protecting the muscle, and that's what it's there for. So when we activate the GTO, it basically inhibits the muscle contraction. So what we're effectively trying to do when we're doing any kind of mobility work is we're trying to fire up that Golgi tendon organ to help let that muscle release a little bit so that we can get a little bit more length out of it. And over time, we can get quite a bit more length in it if it's really tight and we do the work consistently. So basically, there are about 2 core ways that you can personally work on your mobility work. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about some other protocols that work in mobility as a part of them that you could also consider as mobility work. Okay. So the first one is stretching. And we know stretching, there's 2 types of stretching. There's static stretching and dynamic stretching. You've probably seen some of this. You've probably done some of this. When we were getting ready for football when I was a kid, we would do a lot of static stretching. They've learned that that's not the right thing to do. And we'll talk about that in a minute. If you watch an athletic event today before the game starts, you're going to see people doing a lot of bouncing around and running and going side to side and doing things. That's dynamic stretching. That's where they're moving the body through the full range of motion fast, slow, then fast, and through the full range of motion. So static stretching is basically when you get the muscle into a stretched position. So we feel that we've gotten to the end of the length of that muscle and we just lean into it. Now, don't super push, but just get to that point where you feel it. And at this point, when you feel it, so let's imagine we're going to do a calf stretch on a step. So I basically have my toes on the step and I let my heels drop using my body weight to push down. And I get to a certain point. So what you want to do when you feel like you're in that stretch position is just take some long, deep breaths. And as that stretch goes, you're going to feel your heels sink a little deeper into that stretch. You want to hold a static stretch for about 30 to 60 seconds. And the older you are, probably closer to the 60-second mark, just to make sure that muscle is getting a good full stretch to get to the full length. We don't want to really push it, but you should notice over time with static stretching that you get a little deeper and a little deeper as you go because you're beginning to lengthen that muscle and it's not as tight. And if you're doing it consistently, you'll notice that you're starting to get a better range of motion on that side of the range. Okay, dynamic stretching is different, of course, because we're doing a little bit more bouncing. It's not in a set still position. So this might be a situation where we're working on our calves. It might be where we're stepping from one side to the other side and letting that heel go out into almost kind of like a lunge. So what you want to do is start out really slow. Just go through the movement and feel where that edge is on the tightness. And then over time, you'll push a little bit faster, which will put a little bit more momentum into your movement, a little bit more power. And as you hit onto the backside, you're going to stretch a little bit more with that calf. And so a dynamic stretch is going to get you through the full range of motion, slowly releasing that muscle and doing it in a way that's, like I said, a lot more dynamic. Okay, now a couple key things with stretching. One, if you're going to do some resistance training, some strength training, you do not want to stretch the muscles that are doing the work, at least not a static stretch, because a static stretch, again, what we're doing is we're inhibiting the muscle. So when we're lifting, we're going to constrict that muscle as a way of doing the lift. And if we've inhibited the Golgi, hit that Golgi tendon organ, you're going to see a reduce in your strength output. So you don't want to static stretch the muscles that you're going to work. You can do some dynamic stretching for those muscles, but you may want to static stretch other muscles if they have an impact on your form. So an example, I have really tight calves. And so before I go to do squats or leg press, I will always do some static stretching for my calves. And that's just to get my calves lengthened so I can be in a good squat form as I do the squats. So they're safer for me. And so I'll do static stretching. I'll do a warm up. I'll do some static stretching. And I'll also do some self-myofascial release, which I'll talk about in a minute. But basically, I'll do that before because my calves are not involved in the lift per se. But by them being tight, I'm not getting the flexion on my feet, the dorsal flexion on my feet, and therefore my form is messed up. So I want to do some stretching so my calves will lengthen and then they don't affect the form on my squat. So that's just an example. So you would want to do static stretching on muscles that are causing your form to be affected. Okay. And then, so for most of us, hip flexors, calves, maybe some stuff in the shoulders. There are probably maybe some muscles there. I've noticed some people have their trap muscles, their lat muscles might be tight, their chest might be tight. So if you're working another area, you could static stretch those muscles just to make sure that you're getting good solid form and full range of motion on all of your resistance training. Okay. Self-myofascial release is another way of working on your mobility. Okay. Now, you've probably heard this called rolling or smashing. And the only reason they call it rolling is most of the implements we use are round and they're able to roll across the muscle. And the only reason that we use them as a rolling thing is just to find the spots that are sore. Those spots that are sore are where the Golgi tendon is already at kind of the peak tension. It's right there, ready to release. It just hasn't yet. But you don't want to be rolling up and down the muscle. That's just activating it. That's not causing it to release. So we want to roll to a point where we find that pressure point. Okay. And then we want to apply pressure. Now, usually we'll do that with body weight because we're sitting on top of this or we've got our legs on top of something or wherever. So if we're talking about rolling the calves, I'll usually use a ball. And then that ball I'll put under my calf and I'll find the spot that's sore with the pressure on that. And then you just lean into it. I lift my body. Sometimes I'll lift my body weight a little off the ground and more forced onto the ball, and then it'll hurt. It'll hurt, and that's okay. It's what we want. And you hold that similar to the way you did on the static stretch. Just deep, long breaths. Hold it for about 30 to 60 seconds, and you'll feel when that muscle releases. You'll feel it, and it'll release into it. And then you can roll into another position that feels a little sore and lean into that. The theory with self-myofascial release is that we're also doing some basic work on the fascia that's on the outside of the muscle. And by hitting those points, we're basically allowing the whole calf to release. We're realigning the fascia that's around the different muscle group bodies. And with that, then we're basically causing that muscle, we're improving the quality of that muscle. But the reality of it is there's probably some static stretching might be enough for you. Self-myofascial release, if you have some real issues, can be added to static stretching. But I would focus on the static stretching first. You're going to get more benefit out of that, I believe, than focusing a lot of time on self-myofascial release, unless the muscle really needs some additional work. Now, there are other ways that you can work in mobility training with your other training, particularly if you like yoga or Pilates. Okay, a regular practice of yoga or Pilates will help you develop better mobility. Okay, that's part of that training, has a mobility piece, in addition to strength, balance, and stress release. So those are really great protocols if you don't want to spend time just doing stretching or self-myofascial release. If you really just want to do some basic things to improve your overall mobility, you can consider taking up yoga or Pilates. So in closing, we talked about running in episode 651 last week. And in there, Rachel said, you can run most days, but you do occasionally need to take some time off to recover. And I agree with that. With resistance training, when I covered in episode 649, we talked about resistance training and needing for rest between the exercises. So typically 72 hours for someone that's doing a full body workout, you're only going to get 2 to 2.5 workouts a week. With mobility training, though, you can do it as often as you like. There's no rest phase or reason for you to not do it again, other than if it's going to impact other training. But you can do it as often as you like. And in fact, if you're over 40, I recommend you making it a part of your training every day. Do something, some stretching, some movement, maybe some self-myofascial release, take a yoga class, things like that. That's going to help improve your mobility. And it's something that you can do every day. Welcome back, Raz.
Hey, Alan. Mobility is a great topic. Runners are known to, one, not do any warm-ups, such as the dynamic workouts or warm-ups that you were talking about. And two, we are not known to stretch statically or in any other form after a workout, which is really to our detriment. So I do love talking about mobility, even though we are not known to do very much of it. It is very important.
Yeah, when I was an athlete in high school, we would do static stretching before we would do a practice, which was wrong. Right. And then I went to college and I had to take, I took one class for fitness in college, actually. And it was this old dude, really old dude. I mean, he had to be in his late 70s. And he was teaching the class, and it was kind of scary because you only had one test, the final. And so your grade came from one test. And so I paid strict attention to every word that came out of this guy's mouth because I didn't want to mess up my grade point average by getting a low grade because everything was on this cumulative final. But I remember one day specifically, he sat there and he said, there's no reason to do all this stretching and warming up. Your body will warm up. And he literally just sat there, like I said, late 70s guy, he started jumping up and down on a chair. He said, see, I'm warm. And, and he said, I didn't need to warm up before I started doing the work. I'm warm. I didn't really believe him then, and I certainly don't believe him now, or else we wouldn't be doing this episode. Because when you look at mobility training, it is second fiddle to everything. It's like, well, I don't want to spend time doing this, but I can tell you straight up, if I try to do squats without mobilizing my calves, I'm going to be bent over so much that I'm risking damaging my lower back if I have any load on my back at all. It's fine if I'm just going to do body weight squats. I don't really mind that my upper body leans forward because I can't fully lengthen my calves, and therefore my toes are not moving relative to my ankle. Part of it's ankle injury, so part of it is a flexibility problem, but a lot of it is mobility. And if I do my mobility work, the form on my squat is exceptionally better. And the risk to my hurting myself goes way, way, way down. So there's that. And then because of the tightness in my calf, if I go out for a walk, a lot of times my shins, it's not shin splints, but the muscle, the piriformis that runs across the front of the shin, it will get really, really tight and it'll start to cramp and ache. And so what I found is, I literally have to roll my lower leg. If I'm going to go for a long walk, then I'll sit down and say, okay, so I need to sit down and do a little bit of mobility work even before I go on a walk. So if you pay attention to your body, it's going to tell you that you're tight in some place or another. You can look at your movement form and basically see it. And if you don't think you're tight, then you're not paying attention. But if you want some information on how to look at your mobility, where you might be tight, I'm not opposed to doing a movement assessment with you. We can get on a quick little call for 15 minutes. You can email me. I'll get on a quick little Zoom call with you, look at the video, and I can give you some ideas. If you're tight in your hips, if you're tight in your calves, we can move your arms a bit and see if there's any kind of tightness of your lats or your chest. And I can do that in a matter of just a couple minutes. So if you are interested, I'm offering a free movement assessment for you. So you'll know what areas you need to do mobility work on. But you do need to be doing some mobility work. And it is something you can do every day. So adding it to before your workout, before your run is really important if you want to have the best form and avoid injuries.
Oh, I absolutely love that. That's so perfect. I've gone my entire life, Alan, without ever once doing Pilates. It's something I really would like to try. I just don't have the equipment or anything to do that, but I do yoga. And I think it is something that you can do every day because it's not very stressful at all. And it's actually quite relaxing. It has a lot more benefits than you might think of, but it is a simple way and it's entertaining way to do some mobility work and be entertained at the same time. I fully recommend it for all my runners as well. So yeah, for sure. It's so much fun.
It definitely relaxes you because every time they do that at the end, laying on your back, breathing, I fall asleep.
It's very dangerous. Yes.
I fall asleep. Every single time I went to yoga, I would fall asleep during that part of the
It's so relaxing. It is so relaxing and just an easy way to sneak that pesky stretching in when you really don't want to.
Yeah. Well, we have to.
Yes.
So whether you want to or not, you should.
Super important. Yep.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you next week then.
Great. Take care, Alan.
You too. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed today's show, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you would, please leave us a rating and review on your podcast player of choice. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we discuss strategies for losing those last 10 to 15 pounds when you're over 40. Until then, have a happy and healthy week.